We're back to talking about Thomas Aquinas. And instead of talking about question number 2 of the first part of the Summa, first part of the Summa is all about God. We're now in the second part. We're in the first part of the second part of the Summa Theologiae, and that is about human beings. And so we're going to look at a topic that we discussed before, what's happiness? And remember, we talked about this with Aristotle at the beginning of the Nicomachean Ethics. And Plato was concerned about this too, right? How do you make people happy? Epictetus was also concerned with this question. What will actually make you happy? And for Epictetus, it had to do with freeing yourself from things. So we've already seen a number of different answers to this question. What makes you happy? How do you tell what makes people happy? Well, some of you are going into things like fashion or business. Those of you who have figured out what your major is. Some of you are going into criminal justice. You probably actually are interested in the opposite. What makes people unhappy? Because how do we punish people? We make them unhappy, right? We want to motivate people not to do something. So how do you tell in your ordinary life what makes people happy? Because you do. You've figured out what makes you happy, more or less. And you also have to deal with other people you have to make happy if you want to get them to see things your way, right? How do you tell what makes people happy? If you're just to follow me around and say you're going to shadow me for a day, watch me like, say, an anthropologist might, or somebody like that. How would you figure out what makes me tick? What would you observe?
The things that you do, like what you do a lot, because you wouldn't do it if you didn't enjoy it.
Well, yeah.
There's certain things you have to do, but...
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of things in my life just for money, that I wasn't particularly keen on. And unfortunately, a lot of us have to work jobs like that. I don't now, thank God. But I've worked many a job in my life, that I wasn't particularly fond of. But you're right, yeah, you could follow somebody around and see what they do in their work time and also in their spare time. If it turns out that you see me collecting stamps and messing around with stamp books, I must have an interest in that, right? I don't, by the way. I have a hard time understanding stamp collection. What else? What else could you do? That would be like a routine, right? Observe somebody's routine. So you look at what they do. What does what they do tell you about them? Yeah.
Maybe it could give you a little bit of like what kind of a person they are.
Okay. Like for instance, let me give you a scenario. You follow along with me, and I go to a restaurant. And what's always in a restaurant?
Food.
Sort of things. Food, no restaurant, right? What else?
The waiters and waitresses.
Yeah. Now notice, I may have asked you this before. How many of you have ever worked in a restaurant? Any of you? Just a few of you? We've all eaten in restaurants. We've all observed people in restaurants. How do people treat serving staff? Waiters and waitresses, or hostesses, maitre d's, whatever you want to call them. What's the range of behavior that people exhibit towards them? Yeah.
Sometimes people are really respectful, sometimes people are really rude, they just don't care.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Sometimes people are respectful, and they treat them as a person. Sometimes they just don't care. Sometimes they kind of lord it over them. I'm paying your salary, so you better do whatever I say. Do you know who actually gives the best tips? Anyone offhand? Who would you guess gives the best tips? In general. Just take a guess. It's not millionaires. Rich people often don't give very good tips. That's how they got to be rich in the first place. Well, think about it this way. Who do you think can relate to the server or the bussers or the cooks? Who do you think can relate to them the best? Yeah.
I guess like other working class people.
Yeah. Not only other working class people, but other people in the industry. They tend to be the best tippers. And it works that way in most things. They can relate to them. They understand, to go back to this happiness thing, that part of what makes us happy is being treated like we matter, being treated like we're also a human being. We're going to talk about power in a few minutes, and one of the easiest ways that you can have power in this society is to walk into a restaurant. If you want to, if you want to lord it over somebody and treat somebody like garbage, just pay $10 and you can do it for half an hour or so. A lot of people do that. Why do they do that? They think that that's good. You can tell what people desire, what people value, by watching what they do, what they pursue, what about when you have to make a choice? I can do this and I'll have this good, or I'll do this and I'll have this good. Like, let's say the goods are the same kind. Let's say you're lucky enough to have two people interested in and attracted to you at the same time, right? And so you can pick which one you want. How do you decide who to pick? You just get out a pair of dice and let's shoot them or flip a coin, yeah.
Based on who you like better?
And, they may not have exactly the same characteristics. One of them, let's say, is really good looking, but kind of mean to people. The other one's not so good looking, but a lot better of a person. Which do you pick? I mean, it's really easy to say, well, of course we pick the one who's got the good personality. But people get into these quandaries and they have a very difficult time choosing, in part because they haven't figured out what makes them happy yet. Some people think that, if they just get together with somebody who's good looking, they will be happy. And it would be very unusual for people your age, sometimes even for a lot of people my age, to have it all figured out what's going to make them happy. Sometimes it takes you 60 years to figure out what actually makes you happy. But it's worth thinking about. And so this is part of what we do in philosophy classes, and this is part of what Thomas is doing. And we're going to do like a little exercise thinking about your education. Why are you here? What's the whole purpose of this? And whether it makes you happy or not. But before that, let's think about what makes people happy in general. And think about happiness in the full sense. Where have you ever seen people truly happy? Have you? Think about that for a minute. Have you seen people not just, say happy for a moment, but truly happy in a state that lasts and flows throughout their entire life, and you might say even overflows them and helps to make the people around them happy? How many of you have seen people like that? I have. How many of you have? Did you see them in real life, or is this something you saw in a movie or a TV show? Or maybe you read about it? People like that do exist. Happiness like that does exist. But it's not that common in our society. And there's a whole literature about happiness. So, the why out. What can make us happy? That's a fundamental question. And when we ask that, it's really easy to come up with flip things. Well, getting an A in the class, that'll make me happy. Or making it to Thanksgiving, seeing my family again, that'll make me happy. I imagine all of you are looking forward to that, right? If you're sick, you may have a very short horizon. I'll be happy if I can just make it through the class and get to bed and take it easy. Or I'll be happy when I'm no longer sick. If you're in debt, I'll be happy when I'm no longer in debt. If I just get with this person, I'll be happy. If I could just get this thing, I'll be happy. There's a lot of answers like that. But what we want to ask is what will make us really, truly happy? Not kind of happy. There's a lot of things that can make you kind of happy. If I bring donuts to class, That'll make you guys kind of happy, right? I might do that, sometime before the end of the semester. I don't know. It takes a little coordination on my part. But that's not making you happy in a fundamental sense, right? Where you're gonna, it's gonna overflow your life and make other people around you happy. I mean, if it did, then we should all invest in Dunkin' Donuts, because that would be the answer to our questions. A lot of things leave us wanting more. Think about a lot of the things that do make you happy. What are some snacks that make you happy? I can think of, probably too many snacks I like. What do you guys like to eat when you're watching TV on a Friday night? Yeah.
Chips.
Okay, and chips nowadays come in like a million different flavors. And you can get kettle chips, you can get them organic, they don't even have to be made of potatoes anymore. Now you can get them made of sweet potatoes, or I don't know, all these different types of things. And so you eat the whole bag of chips. Any of you ever done that?
And then you're probably not too happy.
Well, you might feel sick afterwards,
Yeah.
so that there could be consequences like that. But you feel full, and you enjoy the taste. I hope you enjoy the taste. Otherwise, you're just doing something quite futile. But does it really affect the rest of your life? Not really. It's not like you can eat your way to happiness. It leaves you wanting more. Not necessarily more chips, right? But more of other things. It doesn't fulfill you. It doesn't, as we say, satisfy you. It doesn't satisfy desire. Some things leave you happy for a time, right? Think about romances. People get involved with another person, and the first couple weeks is they're walking on air. Are they always that infatuated or happy? A lot of times this becomes like a bone of contention in marriages or relationships. People say, you don't look at me the same way that you used to. You used to be so happy with me. Now you're not happy anymore. And that makes me unhappy. Right? Well, that's because some things aren't actually made to last like that. Infatuation and sexual attraction and that whole sense of romantic love may not actually have a shelf life that's that long. That's bad news. The good news is there's other things along those lines that are quite similar, like real intimacy that can last a long time. Or some things can make you happy in some respect, but not really make you happy overall. It's interesting. How many of you would like to win the lottery? Are there any of you who wouldn't like to win the lottery? Nobody? So we all have fairly well-defined feelings about this. What would you guys do if you won the lottery? How many of you would invest it wisely? I mean, I would, because I'm old.
Now that you mention it.
Right, yeah. How many of you would also, do a spending spree? I would do a spending spree, but not so much that I would lose it all. I knew a guy when I was working a security job in Milwaukee, third shift security job, and so I'd go drinking at these third shift bars afterwards, where you can get a drink at 7 in the morning, because your whole schedule is now screwed up because you're working third shift. And those are the bars where you see the people who are hardcore drinkers. That's their life. And there was a guy in there who had won the lottery. And he was a street person. Now he actually still he didn't, some people win the lottery and they just, waste all the money within like a year or 2 years. They buy these settlement plans and all that. This guy didn't do that. He had his money in the bank. And yet what he liked to do was to live on the streets, because he'd done it for so long that he'd gotten used to it, and that was his way of life. And so when he won the lottery, it didn't radically change his way of life, other than now he could buy drinks for everybody. That's how I got to know him, because my buddy, who went to this bar all the time, I only went once in a while, my buddy was friends with this guy because he'd buy drinks all the time. And of course he had all these old kind of, street people, women hanging around him too. This guy was probably about 60. You know, was he happy? Well, in certain respects, I think he was. He always had, you know, money in his pocket. His life was basically about drinking and hanging around with what we call bar flies and shooting pool. Is that being happy in the full sense? What do you think? Do any of you hear that story and say, that's for me. That's the life I want? Or think about it if your brother or sister said that to you, you know, or your parent, you know, as they get older, they say, you know, now that you're out of the house, I think what I'd really like to do is just hang around in bars and drink, and then, you know, live in a cardboard box. What would your reaction be? Something's gone wrong with mom or dad, right? Something's not working right. And why would you say that? Because you think that they are latching on to some sort of lesser idea of happiness than they were previously. And you'd be worried about them, wouldn't you? I think. Well, let's think about what makes you happy. What does make you happy? We talked about this before, earlier in the semester. What makes you happy right now, at this point in time? It could be simple things. Yeah.
My family and friends.
Okay. What is it about them that makes you happy? This can go for any of you, because I'm guessing that almost all of you would say family and friends, right? What makes you happy about them? I mean, if they're jerks, they don't make you happy, do they? When they act like jerks occasionally, as I imagine most people do, they're not making you happy. Sometimes you let them know. What makes you happy in dealing with them? Yeah.
You just enjoy being with them.
Okay, so spending time together. But doing what? I mean, it's not like you just get home over Thanksgiving and there's a bunch of couches and you all just lay there and say, this is really great, I wish we would do this more often, you know? You may actually spend a good portion of Thanksgiving on the couch after the turkey and watching the ball game or something like that. But notice, if you're watching the ball game, you're watching the ball game together, right? If you're eating turkey together and all the other things, you're eating turkey together. If you have family traditions where one of you makes a pumpkin pie and somebody else makes the cranberry, whatever it is, I'm not big on, I don't know why people like that, but and somebody else makes the stuffing, you have a family tradition. You have something substantive that is going on, something that you share with each other. So there's kind of not just spending time, but also sharing in goods. What are the other goods that make you happy? I could ask you something like, what do you like to eat? And I bet every one of you could tell me something, right? You like to eat, right? Is there anyone in here who doesn't like to eat? Find the act of putting things in their mouth, you know, and chewing them and tasting them disgusting. They don't want to have anything to do with it. There are some people who have like a neurological problem with it. That occurs. You know, what do we call these? Pleasures, right? What else do you find pleasant? Yeah.
Running.
Yeah, exercise. I mean, I don't find exercise pleasant anymore, but I remember what it was like when I was in shape to find exercise pleasant. And I'd like to get myself to the point where I find it pleasant again, you know, and the only way I'll do that is by doing the exercise I don't like to do now. But yeah, you know, running for those who are good at running. People play all sorts of physical games together, you know, pick up basketball, pick up football, pick up hockey. My daughter dances, and she does it all the time whether she's in dance class or not, because she enjoys it and she's good at it. So, activity. What are other kinds of pleasures? We'll ask about pleasures and then we'll ask about activities. What other kinds of pleasures that you enjoy? What do you do in your spare time when you're not in classes? Besides work, I know some of you have jobs too.
Sleep.
Yeah, sleeping is enjoyable. That's a pleasure, right? If you're like most students, we're probably actually a little sleep deprived. Most of us, middle-aged adults are chronically sleep deprived too, because we're this worker nation, right? What else? Sleep. What else do you take pleasure in? There's all sorts of things, I imagine, right?
Being in a relationship.
Yeah, sometimes we want to be with family or friends or, what do you want to call them? Partners, right, in a big category, because we enjoy their company. I mean, if you're in a relationship with somebody and they're no fun, why are you in the relationship with them? That's a legitimate question. Sometimes people want to guilt you into, staying, but if you're not enjoying it, from a philosophical angle, you could ask, what's the point of it? I imagine most of you listen to music, right? Watch TV, watch movies. Those are pleasures. That's pleasant stuff to do. What are other activities that you like to do? Yeah.
Basketball.
Yeah, that's a physical activity. Probably you do it in part not just because you like to shoot all the time by yourself, but it probably also has an aspect of communal things, right? Getting together with people. Sometimes you get to meet people by playing games with them. What are other activities people do that they enjoy? Do any of you like working on cars or things like that? No? Anything else mechanical? Renovating houses, yeah.
I work on cars.
You work on cars? That's good. My fiance is actually a gearhead. She thought when she was 16 that she was going to get a fancy car, and instead she was given kind of a run-down car that she had to do a lot of work on, and she found she actually enjoyed doing that. There's a lot of things where we don't know we enjoy them. We don't know that they're part of what makes us happy until we get thrown into them. Okay, so this is all where we are now. Where are you going? You're here at Marist, in part to get an education. Is that going to make you happy? Yeah.
I hope someday it'll lead to being happy.
Okay.
Good job and family and stuff.
Okay, so good job. That's pretty critical. Especially for us Americans, we tend to identify who we are with what we do, much more than people in other countries. One of the first things that you ask somebody after you learn their name at some place where you're meeting somebody on the train, at a convention, is, what's your line of work? What is it that you do? Because we do invest ourselves in that. And presumably going here to Marist is going to help lead you to that, right? If you make the right choices, get good grades, do an internship, all that sort of stuff. You guys are at the front end of that, but you've seen other people doing it, right? Is there anything else that you're doing here at Marist that you think is going to conduce to or lead to your happiness? Or is it purely vocational? If it was, that would be okay. I have nothing against people going to college because they want to get a good job. Some professors kind of look down on that. I come from, the lower middle class, so I understand it. Yeah.
Playing a sport.
Okay, yeah, that could be, that's something along the way. Unless, of course, you're thinking that you're going to do college, sports, and then transition to the minor leagues or the major leagues, right? Does that happen here at Marist? I mean, this is Division I, so I think, actually, maybe I should put this over here, right? And that would probably, for those who like to play sports, fall under the category of good job too, wouldn't it? What else? What else is going on here that you think is going to make you happy? Yeah.
Making new friends.
Yeah, that's, making friends of a different sort than you had when you were in high school, right? One of the great things about college is you get to find yourself, which really means that you get to redefine yourself. You get to decide who you're going to be. And part of that will be your major, won't it? You'll start taking classes with, I mean, people that you're here in this class with, I imagine, I've asked you this before, not too many of you know each other that well, but you're going to see each other in some of the same classes over the next 4 years. Some of you are going to get to know each other very well and become close friends, and you'll hold on to that after college. And you'd never have imagined that when you first sat down next to them. What else? There's another thing that happens in college that we know sociologically. Probably about half of you are going to meet your potential mate either here at Marist or where you go to graduate school, or where you end up working. If we put it to where you end up working, then it goes way, way up. Because the two places that we tend to meet the people that we're going to be involved with long-term or marry are school and work. That's the kind of society that we are. Do you think that has anything to do with your happiness? Of your life? Who you get involved with? Who you marry? Does that have anything to do with whether you're going to be happy or unhappy? What do you think? I bet it has a lot to do with it. Pick the wrong person, you're going to be miserable. Pick the right person, you're probably going to be happy. Pick the right person and then break up with them to go out with somebody who's not the right person, you're probably going to be miserable. So that's kind of important. Relationships. Anything else, though? These are all sort of like endpoints. What are you spending your time doing here at Marist? Couldn't you find a good job or sport to play or people to hang out with or somebody to be with without going to college? Could. Why go here to college? What's that?
Not as good though. Not as much of a quality job, not as much of a quality sport.
Yeah. Notice what happens with that. College becomes just a location where these things happen, or it provides a means. How many of you over the course of this semester, this is part of what I had you do in that assignment where I want you to think about who you're going to write on. How many of you have found at least one philosopher over the course of the semester that you feel you got something out of? That you liked reading and you could see after the course is done, and your hands may start going down now, after the course is done, you'd like to go back and read some more? A few hands went down. Not too many though. What about what's going on in your other classes? Are you finding things that you like thinking about and like talking about that you want to research? I hope all of you are. If you're not, then find other classes. Because what's the point of college, ultimately? It's not just to get you a job, which is a good thing, but it's not the only thing. It's not, to find your mate or make a lot of friends. Why do we have that library over there? If it was, we could do all this stuff and we wouldn't need that library, right? Well, what's in that library that I see some of you at when I myself go to the library? Some of you hanging out there at 9 o'clock at night, which threw me for a loop. I've never taught in a place where students like to be in the library. Why do you go there? Yeah.
Study or do some work.
Yeah, there's a good of knowledge, or, you know, a certain share of wisdom that you're acquiring in college. I mean, I don't imagine any of you are envisioning yourself as philosophy majors right now. And if I say to you, you're cultivating wisdom here at Marist College, you might say, that's silly, I'm just studying this or that. I'm just studying this major or that major, that doesn't have anything to do with wisdom. But actually it does. Everything that you're going to study, the further along that you get in it, the more you start asking the fundamental questions. That's wisdom. And that is what makes some people happy. We saw this when we talked about Aristotle, right? Now let's look at what Thomas Aquinas says. We've thought about, just the nature of happiness and what's going on with your own education. And maybe some of these puzzle pieces will start to come together. Thomas looks at things ultimately from a religious point of view. So you can imagine, what is he going to say happiness ultimately is? Well, those of you who remember what you read, what does he say happiness ultimately has to be? Sometimes when I do this listing of what makes you happy, some of you students will say it. God. I mean, if you have a religious point of view, you can be a philosopher and be religious. But if you are religious, then God had better fit in there somewhere, or otherwise you're not really religious, are you? For Thomas Aquinas, God is going to be the ultimate source of happiness. Well, let's think of this out a little bit. So if God is the ultimate source of happiness, that could be true in a very trivial way. If you believe that God created everything and things make you happy, then God created the things that make you happy, right? So if you like eating filet mignon, God didn't make that filet mignon, but he made the whole universe, and that filet mignon is a part of it, moving together certain parts of the universe, taking a cow and cutting out a certain part of it and then applying fire to it in certain ways and serving it up on a platter. So God could be the source of it, right? He could be the source of that good that you enjoy. God didn't invent baseball, but all the stuff that goes into it, if you're taking this religious point of view, God would have created, not directly, but indirectly. Including gravity, including the laws of physics that you have to have in order to make the baseball work, right? So maybe God created all these things, and among these are some of the things that make us happy. This is what you call created being. And what's created being? Everything that isn't God. Right? I mean, if you think about the traditional Judeo-Christian or Muslim point of view, there was a point in time where God said, let there be light. There wasn't light before that. And now there's light, but light would be created. Or all these animals and stuff like that. Yeah, and you can work in evolution if you want to tie those together. You can say God worked through evolution. We don't want to get tied down to the nitty-gritty. We want to think about this in terms of created being and God. So what about created beings? What are good among them? You guys talked about some of that. It's good to eat, right? If you don't eat, what happens?
You die.
Yeah, and the way to it is not very fun either. I mean, how many of you have gone like a day without eating? I have. What happens?
Sounds terrible.
What's that?
Sounds terrible.
Sounds terrible?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a lot of fun. What happens? Yeah.
Well, you're hungry all day, and you really start getting lightheaded. You really just don't feel well.
Yeah, you have no energy. Your stomach actually starts to hurt after a while. You get hunger pains, right? And then, now imagine doing this day after day after day. After a while, it's not going to hurt anymore, but you're going to waste away. Food is a good thing. It's a good of what? Of the soul? Of the body, right? Keeps your body alive. Thomas divides things, the created goods, into what he calls external goods, goods of the body. And now again, he believes we have a soul, so or you could say goods of the mind too, goods of the soul. And what are some examples of external goods? Well, he tells you about some, like wealth. So, for example, this is an external good. It's not part of my body, right? It's not something that's, you might say, ministering or taking care of my body. It's a possession. What else? Well, wealth of different sorts, right? Like, oh, I don't have any cash on me. But I have, this will work even better, right? Because you can keep track of things. But this is external. This is not part of my body. This is not part of my soul. It's something that I use to get myself and to get, my fiance or my kids or whoever, things that are needful, right? What else? Well, I'm sure that you've all got some of these, right? Thomas actually talks about vehicles. Vehicles are good things, but they're not part of your body or part of your soul. They're external. And so if I, throw these to Mr. Davis, now if I wanted to, he could have my car, right? Probably wouldn't want it. It's an old Taurus wagon, not exactly the most hip or trendy thing to drive around in. You wouldn't go around picking up, people with that, right? Yeah, but it's a good, right? If I don't have my car, I'm a bit unhappy. If I don't have anything in here, if I suddenly find myself with no credit cards and no cash, and say no ID, I would feel panicked. Because these are goods. These are good things. The few times that I've left my phone behind, I end up feeling panicked. Any of you ever go through that? You realize, this is the only place that I actually have my contacts. I've got 50 people's numbers in here that I don't know offhand, and if I lose this, like if I drop this in the bathtub or something, or the sink, well, I'm really in trouble. I better write those numbers down. But those are all external. Can those things make you truly happy? They're good for something, right? What is this good for?
Communication.
Yeah, communication in like a whole bunch of different ways. That's what makes it a smartphone, so I can do my email on here. Can't do my Marist mail. I can get my Marist mail, but I can't send it. So that's kind of an impediment. But you can do a lot of things. I can surf the web with this. What can I do with the stuff that's in here? Buy things, right? What can I do with the thing that this starts?
You can go places.
Move from place to place. These are all useful things. Those are all possessions. Those can make you happy in a sense, but they're not what happiness truly is. Let's think about some other things that are external that it talks about. I'm going to skip over honor, but fame. Some people want to be famous, right? Why do they want to be famous? They think it will make them happy. This is why people are envious when other people are famous. They think that they're missing out on something. So your friend gets recognized for something, but you don't. And you're the one who did it. They're taking your glory. You're feeling like you're missing out on some good. But if you get it, is that really going to make you happy? It might make you feel happy for a little while. But fame is kind of fleeting, isn't it? And it's dependent. If you end up being famous, there's really two main reasons. One is you did something good, the other is you did something bad. And if you did something bad, and you're famous for it, that's not really being happy, is it? Like that lawyer who just went away for manslaughter for Michael Jackson, probably not a happy guy. But if you do something really good, and you become famous for that, like do any of you want to become famous for something that you think you'll do sometime? Or, yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I like to be on the TV. I actually want to be a sports broadcaster. So
Okay, and why would they hire you? Because you do it well, right? And after a while, you acquire a reputation. When I get invited to talk, I get invited to talk basically because I'm good at getting up in front of an audience and spieling stuff out. But that's something good. The fame itself is not the good thing. It's what you're famous for that would be the good thing. So fame itself can't be happiness. What about power? Now we're getting to something more substantive.
If you do good things with your power, then it's something good.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Thomas says. He says, you know, power, whether it's good or bad, really depends on what you do with it. So, I mean, there's all sorts of bad things that can be done once you have power, too. And, you know, that old statement that power corrupts. Why would power corrupt people?
Because you can do what you want, basically.
Yeah. But why would that mean that you would do bad things?
Because you want to keep the power.
Well, there's that, yeah. If you're not completely good, somebody giving you power gives you the opportunity to do bad things, right? So power can't be happiness. Could be a component of happiness. Wealth could be something that leads to happiness. Thomas isn't saying these things are no good. He's just saying they're not ultimately the main thing. What about if we get to things that are more personal, things that really have to do with who we are? Like think about goods of the body. What are things that are good for the body, or that are good in the body? What makes a body a good body?
You're healthy.
Health is a key thing, yeah. Can I have your health? None of you will give me your health? What if, you know, we like took a collection, you know, and each one of you could give me a little bit of your health, and then I'll be much more healthy as a result. I mean, look at me. I'm not in good health. I'm overweight, you know. I've got, you know, Lyme's disease now I found out, and that's not good either, you know. Is health the sort of thing where we can do that? There's actually a movie out, coming out soon, right, where you can do it with time.
Oh, yeah.
What's that called? It's got a bunch of famous stars in it. Looks to be pretty interesting. But it's science fiction, because you can't do that sort of thing, can you? You can't take some of your health and give it to somebody else. I mean, you could do it maybe with an organ transplant. You know, you need a kidney, I give you a kidney. But it's personal. It belongs to the individual. What else is good for the body? Health is important. How about strength? Would any of you like to be stronger than you are, physically? Or have more endurance? Or have more agility, grace? That's a good, yeah.
no, I was just raising my hand.
Okay. What are some other qualities of the body that we say are good things? How about being good looking? We spend an awful lot of money on that, don't we? Huge industry. Not only to be good looking, but to be good smelling, good feeling. I don't know, not really good sounding, I suppose, but yeah. Well, these are all bodily goods, and these are all good things. Are they what happiness consists in? I mean, some people think they are, right? The person who spends all their time in the gym and exfoliating and cleansing and all that sort of stuff, and they have no time left over for anything else, clearly they think that that's going to make them happy. There are some people who do that. But if we consist of body and soul, could anything that just focuses on the body make us truly happy? Wouldn't be satisfying another part of us. I mean, dogs are happy with things in the body. We have 2 dogs, and one of them, dogs will eat until they're like, their stomachs almost explode. They don't have that sort of shut-off thing that we do. And we left the food thing open, and one of the dogs ate like pounds of dog food. Just pounds. Like, we have these big containers, and you could see, like, it was like this much before, and it was like down to here. And then she would just like loll around, almost like she was half dead. Well, that's because that's happiness for a dog. That's as good as it gets, That and maybe chasing things and curling up, with people. But those are all physical goods. What about goods of the soul, then? What makes your soul good? We've talked a lot about this over the semester.
Doing the right thing, like feeling good about yourself and what you're doing.
Yeah, being able to feel good about yourself, not because you're say, lying to yourself or, saying I'm good because I push this person down and make them look good, but because you actually do good things. And if you're the kind of person who does good things, what do we call you? Besides good or nice. Starts with a V. A while back we were talking about this. Good qualities are virtues, right. Virtues are something that you actually possess. If you're actually courageous, that's not something that you had yesterday and you don't have now. It sticks with you. Or if you're just, if you do the right thing at the right time, when it comes to like dividing things up, being fair with people, that's something that sticks with you because it's part of your soul, it's part of your personality, it's part of who you are. And Aristotle thought that happiness did consist in that, didn't he? And Plato seemed to think that happiness was something like that. Thomas says that could be part of happiness, and the soul is actually what we experience happiness through. The fact that you have a soul is what allows you to experience happiness. But ultimately, these are just parts of a larger thing. Once you put God in the picture, God is going to, dwarf anything else. We saw this with Anselm, right? If you have something like that than which nothing greater can be thought, can you put anything else next to it and compare it effectively? What about, like the best meal you ever had? Probably had some really good meals, right? Now put that next to God. Infinite creator of the universe, perfectly good, knower of everything. That really great meal starts to seem kind of pale in comparison. Even the best relationship that you have. Compared to God, working with the traditional concept of God, right? It would seem to pale in comparison. Thomas says any created good is not going to truly satisfy us. Now here's where it gets really interesting. And this is where we actually go a little bit beyond Thomas's text. I had a conversation with I guess you would call him a cousin-in-law to be, right? Somebody who is from my fiance's family. And this guy's a theologian. And he was talking about, let's say we actually get to this stage and we say, yeah, God has got to be in the picture somehow. It's not just all these other created goods. How do people then approach that? If you actually, he's approaching it as a theologian, not as a philosopher like I am. And so what he points out is that if you look at these world religions, and you look at, say, the Bible in particular, what do you see over and over again? You see that people who are religious will know on some level that God is the ultimate good, right? And happiness itself. But where do they place all their efforts? Where do they place their enjoyment? In the good things which they take to be provided by God in some way, right? So if you think about the goodness of God, if we want to use that term goodness, there's the goodness of God as what God is, and then there's the goodness of God as in God like giving you nice things, lots of things, right? So if you believe that you have your life because God made you live, that's a good thing, right? Or if let's say you're the Israelites out in the desert, and manna comes down from heaven, and you get quail every once in a while, when you didn't expect to get it, which is basically the story, right? And so you've got good food, and you didn't die out in the desert, and you believe that God gave that to you. Well, you could say he's a really swell guy. He treats us really nice, but we're not really interested in who he is or what he is. We're interested in what he gives us. Life and happiness, this way and that way. So there's this constant tension. Thomas is saying that what's going to make us truly happy is not just all the things that we get, but God himself, God itself, however you want to think of it. I suppose you could say God through self, because Thomas was a Trinitarian, typical Christian. Now, if you say it like that, it sounds kind of sterile, doesn't it? It sounds kind of strange to maintain that, well, all these other things aren't going to make you truly happy, only God is. But then what is God? Let's think for a minute about our ideas of God. What do people typically say if you ask them, I don't know what this God thing is that you're talking about. Tell me a bit more about God. What do they say? Besides read the Bible, because that's not much of an answer yet, right? That's just sort of putting it off. Go find the answer yourself. Let's say you generally had somebody who was perplexed and said, what's this God business you keep talking about? What might you say? Yeah.
That he's supreme, and that he created all life on earth.
Okay. So we would talk about these metaphysical attributes. Supreme, meaning above everything else. Supreme in what ways? Supremely cool? It could be, I guess. I don't know. Cool is kind of a human thing. It varies from place to place. Supremely good, I guess. Supremely wise. When I was a math major, I used to think of God as the being that knew the answers to all the problems that we couldn't figure out. And it'd be kind of nice to be able to talk to something like that, because then you know the answers and why they are the way they are. But that really, that's you're going to only see that as a good thing if you're really into answers, right? If you don't care about that sort of thing, you're probably not going to be very impressed. This is a tough one. If you say that God is happiness itself, that God is what we would have to seek in order to truly be happy, those metaphysical attributes are important. I would like to be in touch with whatever is supremely good, whatever is supremely wise. But do you think that's enough? Would that make you happy? Do you think anything more would be required? Thomas is not telling us what else would be required here. He does in other parts of the Summa, but I want us to sort of think this out. Try on a different thought. what would it take in order to find your happiness in God, rather than all these other great things? Maybe it would be, you could just be disgusted with everything, right? Try everything out. I mean, if you ever read the book of Ecclesiastes, it's worth reading. If you think that the Bible is just a, sort of happy, skip along, everything's great, kind of Pollyannish kind of document, it isn't. I mean, the book of Ecclesiastes is a philosopher who's saying nearly everything is when you get down to it, crap. And I know, because I've actually tried it all out, and I found that this was great for a while, and then it went to crap. And this was too, and that went to crap. And I was the king for a while, and that wasn't so hot. And if you look at the world, you notice that good people are getting it in the neck, and bad people are prospering, and that doesn't seem too hot either. That's in the Bible. That's one of the sort of perspectives that's put across. So maybe you could get to God by saying, well, everything else is such a disappointment. Let me try this. How does that sound to you? Yeah.
If you don't know what God is, then how can you find God? I don't get it. Like you said, we relate to God through what He's given us, but if we can't determine ourselves what God is and what is He doing for us, He is.
How can you know what to seek if...
Like if God does exist and God gave us all these things, and
Yeah.
that's what we relate to God. But
well, I mean, are there other ways to relate to, or that other people talk about relating to God? What do people do who claim that God is an important part of their life? Some of them are kind of, some of them are kind of put you off, right? Because they say that God's a really important part of their life, but they spend most of the time criticizing everybody else. That's not a big turnout, is it? But what do people who you can actually respect, who claim that God is an important part of their life, what do they do that's different than other people? Anything? If they don't, then maybe you could just take God out of the picture. What do genuinely religious people do? Yeah.
Try and convince you things about their own religion.
Some of them do. Some of them, yeah, they do what we call evangelizing. They not only want them to believe, they want you to believe too. But a lot of them don't. I've known a lot of religious people who don't try to evangelize. They do other things, yeah.
if somebody's secure in their belief of God, then why do they need to prove to other people that God exists?
Well, like I said,
why
some of them don't.
Why do they really care if other people believe
Oh,
that God exists?
let's go off on that. That's kind of a digression, and we'll come right back to
Some people share it because they want other people to be able to feel what they feel, be as happy as they are.
There's the answer, yeah. If I've had a really good experience and I care about you, I would want to share it with you, right? And that's, some people seem to want to evangelize because they want everyone to believe like them, and other people seem to actually want to communicate some good that they experienced. Sometimes it's difficult to tell the difference too, isn't it, between those, until you get to know the person. But what else do religious people do that's different? How do they end up having that sort of experience, where they enjoy something that they say, I couldn't get this anywhere else? There's no one single answer, by the way, to this. We know this by looking at religious people. Some of them pray. I mean, myself, I have a hard time imagining, I don't have a hard time sort of sympathizing with, but imagining what somebody does who prays for a couple hours a day. What they could possibly talk about that long, because I know I can't, think of much to talk about myself when I think about some supreme being that I would connect myself to. But that's probably a problem on my part, right? That's a failure on my side, not on that side, I think. What else do they do? Some religious people don't pray much at all. Mother Teresa, said she had a very barren prayer life, and yet she was this great religious leader. She went around and served people, took care of lepers and dying people in dirt poor India. That made an impression on a lot of people. They said, well, there must be something in this lady's life that she gave up everything else to experience this. The funny thing was, turned out that when we read her diaries, she wasn't actually experiencing that. She said she felt barren all those 50 years that she was working, but she did it anyways. That's probably a good place to stop. I mean, Thomas is taking us to this notion that happiness has to somehow include God. And once you put God in the picture, it's sort of like, bringing the elephant in the room. It's bigger than everything else. But we have to think about what would being happy in God actually look like. We know what it was for Thomas, studying stuff, and writing books, and going to Mass. He was a priest. What would it be for other people? And would it be something different in our culture at the time? That's worth thinking about. So, see all of you Monday.